Hello, happy afternoon, friends. I hope that your Wednesday is going well. Welcome back to Stories with Pastor Macy. Today we're going to read part 1 of a story. We've read several of these stories by Danae Dobson about Woof, a lovable mutt adopted by the Peterson family. So we read at one point, Woof finds a home, finds a family, about how it is that this lovable mutt with a crooked ear came to be adopted by the Peterson family. And then last week or 10 days ago, we read about Woof Goes to School, which was a story about rescuing some other dogs. And today we're going to start the third Woof story, which is called Woof and the Haunted House. And the Bible verse for our theme for this story is Psalm 19:14. Think about the words you say. Are you ready? Here we go. In the center of town, near Mark and Chrissy Peterson's house, stood a spooky-looking home. Years ago, it had belonged to a strange man who people came to call Old Man Wilson. No one knew him very well, and he seemed to have no friends. Mr. Wilson had bent shoulders and long white hair. He walked around town very slowly with the help of a big black cane. Mr. Wilson seemed even more strange as he grew older. He talked to himself when he walked along the sidewalk in town. Sometimes he stood in his front yard for a long time, just looking into space. Of course, the children in that part of town began to tell scary stories about the old man. As the years went by, Mr. Wilson began to be sick more often, and one night before his 86th birthday, he went to bed, and the Lord quietly took him to heaven. He had lived a good, long life. The next week, a city workman came and boarded up the windows and doors so children could not go inside the house. It was not a safe place to play. All of this happened years before Mark and Chrissy Peterson were even born. By the time they came along, there was a great mystery in the town about Mr. Wilson's old house. No one had lived there since he died. You would be surprised by the scary stories that school children told. Parents sometimes let their kids believe the stories so that they would stay away from the old house. Mark, who was 6 years old, had heard all the tales. He wasn't sure he believed them, but the old place did look pretty scary. He and Chrissy walked past the Wilson house every afternoon on their way home from school. Someday, thought Mark, I will find out what it looks like inside. One Friday afternoon, Mark decided that this was the day. He told his 10-year-old sister about it after school. I don't know, Mark, she said. I'm afraid of that house. I've heard it's haunted, and a lot of strange things have gone on there. Their dog Woof, who'd been lying on his bed, sat up and cocked his head from side to side. Mark laughed at his sister. That's silly. You're just a big coward. Please go with me. Besides, Mom won't let me go that far unless you come along. Chrissy thought for a moment. Well, all right. Well, she went to get her jacket and a flashlight. Mark telephoned his best friend, Barney Martin, and asked him to join them. Barney agreed to go, so the two children and Woof began to walk toward his home. Barney met them at the door, and he looked a little uneasy. I decided not to go to the Wilson house, he said timidly. My brother has heard all sorts of stories about kids getting trapped in there and never getting out. He said people have seen Old Man Wilson walking around the grounds and... Oh, Barney, said Mark, interrupted. You're just being silly. Woof barked and wagged his tail, as if to agree. Barney looked at the ground and put his hands in his pockets. Well, all right, I'll go with you, he said, looking back at his friends. But if anything goes wrong, don't say I didn't warn you. With that, all three children and Woof headed toward the old house. Barney froze when he caught sight of the rooftop. I don't want to go any further, he said nervously. Mark was beginning to lose patience. Barney, would you stop being a scaredy cat and come on? Barney caught his breath and continued to walk, but he would have rather been anywhere but near that old house. By the time they got to the front yard, even Woof seemed a little uneasy as he sniffed the air. The children stood at the iron gate and gazed at the run-down house. It was surrounded by weeds and bushes. The windows and doors were nailed shut with boards that had been sloppily placed over the openings. The setting sun outlined the building in an orange glow as the trees swayed back and forth around its aging panels. Woof began to growl, and the hair stood on end on his neck. Let's see if we can find a way to get inside, said Mark. Chrissy held her brother's arm as they crept slowly around the outside of the house. Woof trotted ahead of them, disappearing around the corner. In a second, they heard him barking. Look, Woof found an opening, Mark said excitedly as he rounded the corner. Sure enough, a board had come loose from one of the sides of the house. Let's go, exclaimed Mark. Barney gulped and held his breath as the three children and Woof pushed their way past the opening. Inside the dark house, the air smelled musty. Mark turned on his flashlight and held it up high so they could see. Many mysterious shapes surrounded them. The children listened to the wild beating of their hearts as they looked around the cold and dusty room. Ancient pieces of furniture were covered with sheets, and a grandfather clock was no longer ticking. On the floor was Mr. Wilson's black cane, and a pair of tiny wire eyeglasses lay on the table. Everything looked as though someone had left in a hurry. The children tiptoed across the creaky floor. Mark picked up a picture of a woman with white hair. He whispered, "This must have been Mr. Wilson's wife." The children had almost forgotten how frightened they were when Woof suddenly stiffened and growled. The hair on his back stood straight up. Chrissy grabbed her brother's arm tightly and gasped. "I'm scared," she said. "Me too," Mark admitted. Barney was so frightened that he couldn't even speak. He just stood there with his teeth chattering and his knees knocking. As the three children clung to each other, Woof began making his way upstairs, growling and sniffing the air. When he reached the second floor, he disappeared around the corner. In a few seconds, he began barking loudly. "Let's go see what he found," Mark whispered. "No way," said Chrissy, shivering. "We should get out of here right away." Yeah, said Barney, his trembling voice. "Let's go." "We can't leave Woof," Mark told them. "Yeah, what if somebody's up there?" Chrissy said with both hands over her face. "We have to get Woof," Mark said. "He might be in trouble." "Try to call him, Mark. Maybe he'll come," Barney said. Mark went to the foot of the staircase and took a deep breath. "Woof! Come here, boy!" But Woof didn't come. He just continued to bark louder from a room at the top of the stairs. "It's no use," Mark said firmly. "We have to go up there and get our dog. Besides, I want to know why he's barking." The three children joined hands and huddled close together. Carefully, they made their way up the rickety stairs, which squeaked with every step. Mark, in the lead, held the flashlight firmly. Suddenly, Chrissy screamed. That is the end of part 1 of the story Woof and the Haunted House. We will finish it tomorrow morning. And remember, our theme is Psalm 19, verse 14. Think about the words you say. So we'll figure out why Chrissy screamed and what happens to Woof and Chrissy and Mark and Barry tomorrow. I'll see you then. Have a wonderful evening.